All right, peace, black family. Welcome to Melanated Solutions Media Broadcast. We are bringing to you tonight Black Entanglements Part 2, Detangling the Black Agenda. We broadcast to you twice a month, every second and fourth Friday. You're also welcome to join us via the chat room, as well as you can come on video with us. We will be putting a link into the chat box so that you can click on that and join the discussion when we do open it up to everyone. Right now, we have myself, Kashama Sankofa. We have Dr. Cleo Monago. We also have Brother Duke the Root coming to discuss these issues with you, issues that are relevant to Black people. So, Duke, before we begin, do you think you can catch us up with some of the comments or questions or any criticisms, whatever the audience might have had for us from the last broadcast, live stream?
All right, thanks, Kashama. So I just have a couple of notes here. So one, back during July 24th, our previous live stream, Black Entanglements Part 1, I just want to highlight these comments we had from one, Allow B. Denny III said, "This has been so nourishing. Thank you again." Also acknowledging Yemi Dre Melende, who said, "Good job, Africans. We love you, Melende." And also, I want to shout out to Rodney S. Williams Jr. for showing, based on our discussion, the comparisons between how the gay rights movement and the feminist movement has used similar tactics to disrupt the civil rights movement. And so just want to highlight those particular thought processes. And again, we try to address comments during the live stream, but also feel free to leave things. We may give you a shout out during our next live stream. And if you have any criticisms, we can address those as well. With that being said, on to current events.
Quick question though, Duke, before we leave you. You said that someone mentioned that the LGBT and the feminist movement were disrupting the civil rights movement. Whose civil rights movement?
Black people's civil rights movement.
Okay.
During the time.
Just to make sure you were talking about, don't kill the dolphins. Be real specific.
Well, before we even get into the current events, I want to just acknowledge Brother Deshaun Farad, renowned Black journalist who works independently as well as with certain affiliates to bring us the news from a pro-Black perspective. He just said Hotep Black Power to us. So Hotep, Brother Deshaun, and assalamu alaikum to you as well. So current events. Well, first thing, we had this, everybody went crazy over Beyonce and this Black is King. I believe it's called a visual
album.
Right. Visual, like Thriller, kind of, right? Or whatever.
Like Black is King, like Lemonade, like visual album.
Like Lemonade, yeah, like Lemonade. So I'm guilty, okay? I said for the team to watch it, and I couldn't find the time myself to watch it, even though I saw some clips and I thought it was beautiful. I think Beyonce is beautiful. And anytime I see Black people dancing and moving all African and being proud of themselves and showing themselves in our own image, I like that. And it was very surface for me. But there was some criticisms that people had about it, and I think some of them were legitimate or valid, and some of them were just kind of could have had a V8.
For example,
thing about that.
No, I'm too young to understand that. But what
I did hear about one criticism.
Well, what did you hear about, dude?
So one of the major criticisms I heard was the idea that perhaps Beyonce was appropriating African culture. That's one. And beyond that, there was discussion about this idea of putting Africa in a bubble far as quote unquote tribalism and not recognizing the expansiveness of Africa. That was some particular communication around it. Of course, there's been rebuttals. I've seen pros and cons, if you will, for this particular argument. As far as various sides of the diaspora, many people have become vocal about what is okay to present for Africa and what is not. But yeah, I don't know if you had any others before I go into my opinions.
I didn't hear that about the tribalism thing, because from what I saw, just a little bit that I saw various regions of Africa being represented in that. And I think maybe the people who said that maybe don't know what the hell they're talking about. But I saw
Well,
some.
it's Africa, first of all. Like, it's not some place that we are learning about actively in our particular society. But there's also discussion, which, as much as I love Beyonce and what she has done for the culture, to the culture, she is a capitalist, and that does come up a lot during the particular visual album in the artistry showcase. So there is a discussion about, like, is this really liberation, or is this like, as long as I got money, then we're good, we're okay as a people.
Well, I don't think nobody should confuse it for liberation. That doesn't take anything away from it. Hell, no, I mean, no song or visual album is going to be liberation. I just think is black people expressing themselves and being cute while doing it. One thing that I did see that I think is partly of a legitimate criticism is they were saying that there was a lot of monarchical images or showing black people as like royalty. There's a lot of that in it, and I think there is a overwhelming narrative that we were all kings and queens when in fact we weren't all kings and queens, and that's okay. That doesn't take away from our value as black people. Nobody still had no business coming snatching us up and enslaving us. We didn't have to have gold dripping out of our asses in order for that to not be legitimate. So
I think what I would want to say on this particular discussion is that I value the fact that Beyonce is in a place where she's able to do this work, and we as Black people can intersect and dissect this particular work, because so often as individuals who are outside of the culture trying to present a particular narrative, and we just have to quote unquote accept. When it comes to what is being presented as an artist myself, I know one thing that I struggled with was even the colonization of my imagination, which is something that some of artists have been in discussions about now. But it's like, as a writer, sometimes when I write stories, there was a time where I didn't even recognize that the characters in my story weren't Black. And they were all particularly either light skinned or white, to be honest. And I had to make the intentional effort to change how I perceived science and like science fiction and future with Black people in it, even in an imaginary world. So as much as I understand that we weren't all kings and queens in Africa, I'm also cautious about how often we feel challenged or uncomfortable with the idea that Black people can be of royalness inside of our society. So I think it's definitely just space on both sides to talk about and intersect with that.
Yeah, I'm glad you did it so that we can have this conversation.
For those of you who are just chiming in and wondering what we're talking about a Beyonce project called Black King. I have not seen it yet, but I've heard people talk about it. But that's what they're talking about, y'all. Just in case you just chimed in and you want to, what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, we're done talking about that now because I think we've gotten as much as we can get out of it. Like I said, we're grateful she made it so that we can have this conversation and discuss something other than what we usually see in pop culture. But
I'll say something real quick. I can be quick. I heard some of those criticisms, but I think it's important to understand that often it's not simply said that we were all kings and queens, but that we came from kings and queens. And that there are, similar to what you're saying, Kashama, that there are Black kings and queens. There still are right now. I mean, there's a king of the Ashanti kingdom right now who got the royal court, the whole thing. I saw him with my own eyes. But we don't know who he is. And there's a queen. And we're talking about a real queen with a bloodline that's older than England. So but we don't know nothing about it. We know about Lady Di, but we don't know about Lady Alive. You know what I'm saying? Somebody who's living and actually reigning in an African country right now. So anyway, so I want to bring that in there, right?
Well, speaking of Beyonce and Africa and the Orishas, Duke, your Orisha Ogun is being blamed for breaking this basketball player's kneecap, man. And you need to do some explaining.
So, one, I want to be very clear, especially for any ordained ministers or priests watching. I have not been, I have not gone through the process or the ritual. I've been told by a couple of people that my Orisha is Ogun, and based on what I've seen and read, I like it. I feel like I vibe with that energy. With that, I want to be clear. Wrathfulness is within all of us, and if you do something ironic, and then irony comes back to you, you got to deal with it.
What y'all talking about? What happened? Did something happen?
Well, you're
Talking
just beating around the bush. This basketball player refused to take a knee along with the rest of his teammates. And about what was the next game after that, people are saying.
So full context. So we're talking about Jonathan Isaac. Right. So we're talking about Jonathan Isaac, who plays for some basketball team that I don't watch basketball.
Orlando
I think
Magic.
Blues something. Okay, there we go.
Orlando Magic, yeah.
Yeah. So he refused to kneel for the anthem, and he cited his reasoning was because he is a Christian, and unlike the white dude who said that he wouldn't kneel because he believed in false idolship to kneel, Jonathan's reasoning is that the power and love of Christianity should overstand any and all issues, and racism is not the only issue, and that the goal of his particular life path is to bring unity, and in order standing for the anthem in name of Christ is more union than he thought far as kneeling for Black lives. So
I'm about to find his quote, Duke, because he was you just made him sound way more articulate than the babble.
I mean, that's my job because I love and I value Black people. So I'm
yeah, well, damn, no, don't give him what he didn't get, what he didn't do.
I love and value them enough.
I'm gonna read his exact babble so we can understand this type of mindset and how it would never make sense. Let me find it. I should have put it in our media sources, so I could have quickly grabbed it.
I had it up. Let me see if y'all don't mind. But as we're talking about it,
okay, here it is. Absolutely, I believe that Black Lives Matter. A lot went into my decision, and part of it is my thought that kneeling or wearing a Black Lives Matter T-shirt do not go hand in hand with supporting Black lives. I felt like just me personally and what it is that I believe and standing on the stance that I do believe that Black Lives Matter, but I just felt like it was a decision that I had to make. I didn't feel like putting that shirt on and kneeling went hand in hand with Black lives. My life has been supported through the gospel. Through the gospel Jesus. Everyone is made in God's image, and we all fall short of God's glory. Each and every day, one of us do things every day that we shouldn't do. We say things we shouldn't do. we shouldn't hate or dislike. Sometimes it gets to a point where we point fingers. Whose evil is worse? Sometimes it comes down to whose evil is most visible. I felt like I wanted to take a stand on we all make mistakes, but gospel says there is grace for us. I could keep going, but
you won't. And the reason with that being said, I believe the gospel answered in the very next game. The gospel said within 15 minutes that your ACL will be torn, and that's what happened to the brother. And that's what I take away from this particular moment. I have nothing else to take away. I don't know if you all have any other clarifying thoughts. But for me, it was just ironic.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes, clear.
Okay. Yeah. What I just want to, it was funny, but it was sad because what I think his commentary re-establishes is that white Christianity teaches us to be resistant to having respect for ourselves. And that whole commentary that you read, Kashama, is a white accommodationist commentary. And instead of saying, I don't want to hurt white people's feelings because I feel like they're superior to Black people and Black people are inferior, he talks all this crap about Jesus. But the bottom line, brother, was that, in case you're watching, is that taking a knee is on behalf of Black people and in resistance to injustice. And it's in resistance to evil behavior toward Black people in particular. And for you to use Jesus, which is clearly a white Jesus, as an excuse and all the other rhetoric that he said, just reiterates the power of white supremacy mythology and the poison of Euro-Christianity religion on Black people, because it teaches us not to even protect or respect or defend ourselves and just leave ourselves open to white supremacy madness.
Mm-hmm. I always find the conversation difficult because I've far removed that particular doctrine from my life. I don't need it. I'm very good without it. But there's so many of our people who still love and honor this particular concept, which there's just numerous evidence of how detrimental it is. But in the space of trying to respect and navigate with Black people, I'm not involved in the conversation as much as I would like to be, because it just gets so heavy and toxic at times. You feel as if you cannot move forward with another person because of this particular disagreement.
Yeah, but I'm not even talking about agreement or disagreement. The fact of the matter is, the knee taking is resistance to white supremacist, racist injustice, violent injustice. That's a fact. That's not my opinion. For a Black man to say all that stuff that Kashama read is somebody who, in a white supremacy accommodation is delusional trance, who's talking all this stuff when really on a subconscious basis they want to defend and protect whiteness. So that's not
that comment.
That ain't my opinion. That's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
So
Michael Presley said,
people might not be interested in facts, but at least share them.
Mm-hmm. Michael Presley said the original U.S. national anthem is saying that African Americans are not even human and glorifying Black inhumane slavery, which is absolutely true. But what I will also add to that is it's within the doctrine of Christianity, at least the way that we know it and teach it, for the same Black life to be devalued and undermined. So the fact that Jonathan Isaac holds so tightly to this particular ideal of Christianity being the great unification is not only ill-learned, but it also makes sense. It makes sense why he would stand for this particular anthem, because he's already within that particular concept and ideology that this is what's needed in order to be a quote-unquote productive human being, to not be confrontational, to pursue love and happiness and quote-unquote freedom.
But the part of
I want to go ahead, Cleo.
Well, the part.
No, go ahead, please, because it wasn't that important what I was going to say. It can be said at the end.
I just want to reiterate that the part what Duke is underscoring is that all his white accommodations Christianity didn't protect his kneecap or something, and that he wound up being. It seemed seemingly that he was punished by the Black Jesus.
Now, what I believe, the irony that I love about this is that it was a leg injury. And that just means for me that you should probably kneel on it a little bit for healing. You shouldn't stand so tall during the next anthem. That's what I got from that particular moment. David Brown says, I've always asked Black folks in regards to Christianity, how do you know that what you know is correct? This concept has helped me move away from that ideology. I believe that's a good starting question. It's definitely something that I don't want to go too far into my own personal story. I think we all have stories, but for me, it was as simple as reading the Life of Narrative, Frederick Douglass' book, his autobiography. The opening, before you even get inside the book, the prologue is him detailing how his aunt is being whipped while white slave masters decide to read and quote the Bible as justification for this particular act. And I had other reasons to question Christianity for that moment, but that was the moment where it was just like, you know what? There's so many parts of me that are not affirmed in this, that are so many parts of my identity, my life that is not loved and uplifted within Christianity. And now you're saying my skin color ain't either. I'm done. Like that was my movement, and there's been many movements past that. But faith is a hell of a drug. Faith is something that we all test and do work with. We all believe in different things, and for some, they have fallen, in my opinion, trapped to this Christian trap, this white accommodationist trap. People have faith in white supremacy. even Black individuals, they have faith in it, and our job is to point out why you shouldn't, and move on from there.
Well, what I think is very important, and what he pointed out when he started talking about, the religion, I wasn't going to focus so much on the religion aspect of it, and more so on his inability to make it make sense. Like, whether you want to this whatever system of belief system that you're part of that doesn't promote a certain level of critical thinking and promotes a certain type of blind faith, especially in white supremacy and in white imagery. You know what I'm saying? That's an issue. And what that brother David Brown just did, when you ask that question of yourself, what you're doing is critically thinking. There's this thing called suspension of disbelief that we have back when I studied in the theater, whereas when you're in some kind of play or something, whereas you're playing a half man, half donkey or something, that doesn't exist. But the audience has to enter into a mental contract with you as the actor, in order to throw out all of their logic, everything that they know to be true outside of that theater. They come in and they put that into suspension for the 2 hours or so that they're watching this movie, this play, this TV show, or whatever. So when you engage in that suspension of disbelief as a key component of your everyday life, you end up babbling like this brother did when asked to explain his crazy actions. He couldn't make it make sense. All he could say was, "What I felt and I feel, and Jesus and I feel, and is any white folks listening?" That's what pretty much.
Well, he's
what he
also
did.
an ordained minister, so he's used to babbling. Michael Preston said the original white Christianity that was preached for generations thought that Black people don't have a soul. Correct again, but I think I don't know if there's too much more else to say on this particular.
Yeah, let's prepare. Prepare. I think
we got a couple more stuff going on in the world too.
Wait a minute, can you hear me? Because I was getting ready to say something.
Yeah.
Okay. All I wanted to say was, I think we agree that your Christianity leaves us vulnerable.
Well, okay. So aside from that basketball player, we do have some serious things going on the real Black tip. We have let's start with the uprisings in Chicago, because we have one of our broadcast, producers who helps us backstage. Brother Adam lives in Chicago, and he can give us some insight on what's going on there. Can you come on, Adam, and give us a brief report on the happenings in Chi-Town?
Oh, hey guys.
Hey.
How's it going? Can you hear me?
Hello. Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Cool. So the only thing that's happened in Chicago that isn't new is the looting. And I'm not going to editorialize why I think looting is happening. But as of today, the mayor of Chicago has said that she's going to put 1,000 more police on the street downtown, which is the wealthy part of the city, to protect the businesses. And really, her focus and CPD's focus is to protect the money and not the actual people. They're not doing a lot of work in the neighborhood. She outlined a 10-point platform that did not address the root of why people are responding the way they are. Now, last weekend, they said that the looting was a direct response to a police-involved shooting. Community people say that the police officer shot the man in the back and he didn't have a weapon. The police are telling a different story. And magically, the policeman that was involved, didn't have his body camera on. So, as far as the looting goes last weekend, that was from my perspective, that was a planned action. It was not a response that was spontaneous, in my opinion. When people have U-Hauls and they're showing up in cars and caravans and stuff like that, like that's planned. They have to think about that. They have to go get the U-Haul. They have to go rent the cars. in order to make that happen. So that's pretty much the Cliff Notes version of what's going on in Chicago. Any questions for me?
So how long has this been going on, the rising, uprising?
At the moment, I think right at the beginning of what happened with George Floyd, I think Cleo mentioned on the last live that that coupled with the COVID-19 pandemic, where people are forced to stay indoors, is a perfect storm for that kind of activity. So it just seems to be more sensationalized because of Chicago. You know, the president doesn't like the city of Chicago. So yeah, that's pretty much what's going on.
Somebody was killed, right?
He's not killed. He wasn't killed. He was in a hospital. The young man.
What was his name? How old was he?
Originally, they said 15. CPD is saying 20. Either way, Black life, so age didn't matter to me. He is in stable condition, I believe, now in the hospital from his gunshot wound. So he's still alive.
Thanks.
No problem.
Thank you, Adam, for informing us on what's going on. Like I said, we went to Adam because he lives in Chicago. We don't go by just, the mainstream or what we would call white media narrative. It is very important that we control our own narrative. And right now, while we have the technology that we have, there's no excuse for us to be repeating what somebody off of CNN said about Chicago when, most of us know somebody or got a cousin or somebody in Chicago. Speaking of, go ahead.
He may be gone for good, but I actually had a question for Adam, and before he comes out, I can state what the question is. So, living here in Baltimore, we hear about the quote unquote violence that happens in Chicago often, and it's a national narrative that Chicago is like this bubble of quote unquote, with the language that doesn't exist, what they say is called black on black crime. And I was wondering, as a Chicago resident, like, how do you perceive and interact with the city that you live in? Because I know sometimes the same things are said about Baltimore, and I'm like, all my friends are here. There's a recklessness in how we talk about intercommunal crime, and I was just wondering, what are your thoughts on your own city, being a Chicago resident?
Yeah, so first let me start by saying Chicago is the most segregated city in the country. So because of that, the resources are not equally distributed between communities. So where most Black people live, and Cleo's been all of the city with me here, where most Black people live, you can tell the disparity of and between the distribution of resources between Black neighborhoods and on the north side, they call it, which is where I live. But I moved to the north side when this neighborhood was all Africans, but that's changed because of gentrification and whatnot. So there is an issue, but I think mostly there's an issue with how they police in the Black community and how they interact with Black men, women, and trans folks in the community. So that coupled with just hopelessness, if that's a word we want to use in this city, is part of why there is an issue. But I don't think there's an issue. I don't think it's unlike any other issue in any other part of the country. I think there's just a media focus on Chicago and what's going on in Chicago. Now, do we have weekends where 60 people are shot? Of course, but that's not every weekend. It's happened, but that's not every weekend. I think East St. Louis is supposedly per capita the most violent city in the country. I'm from right across the river, so I'm more intimidated by that than going to the south side of Chicago personally.
Anthony,
go on.
Anthony DeMarco McCrae said, man, the crime here ain't as high as they projected. I've lived in Inglewood my whole life." Just someone else perspective.
Yep.
I just want to say that what you mentioned, Adam, seems to be the same issues that I hear across the nation. That it's not necessarily a lot of intercommunal crime that's happening. It's a lot of economic violence that is happening. There's a lot of curricular violence happening in these particular communities where Black people reside that often results in these weekends, if you will, that become blasted on mainstream media as the narrative of how Black people are operating, living, and communicating in those cities.
Right.
Cleo?
I wanted to mention that crime, one of the ways of finding out where crime is occurring in this country is the FBI surveillance reports, which breaks it down by gender, by race, by economics. And there's really gruesome violence happening in other communities, and some of that violence is way worse than Black people can even imagine, frankly, particularly in white communities. And it's interesting to just underscore that the media perpetuates a narrative that makes it look like where Black people live is particularly violent. I'm from Compton and Watts, as I think some of you know. And that when I was a child, I kept hearing how bad it was and how horrible it was. And I was trying to find it because I didn't see all of that was being portrayed. So I just want our listeners, those who tend to believe that what they hear in the press to be true, to understand that the press is biased. And yes, violence occurs, including in Chicago and St. Louis, but violence occurs in a country that was built on violence.
Yep.
So it's everywhere. I also want to just mention to people who have made comments that I know there's one on the screen, but David Brown has requested that at some point we talk about colorism, and I want to acknowledge David's suggestion and let him know that we will talk about that. He might even come up tonight based on a certain topic, which I won't mention. And Stephen Gaskill asked
we know when that's going to come up.
Stephen asked, did anyone speak to the instigators in the mess? I guess he's referring to Chicago. And Jarvis McClain said, hey guys, and one comment, we don't want to go back to this issue, but I think we should honor what he said. Patrick Daly said that what we were discussing was a westernized mutation of Christianity, and that we don't all follow that mutation of Christianity. I guess he's trying to say that there's some blacker versions or more black affirming versions of Christianity. Again, we don't got to go there and go back to that, but I want to acknowledge the nuance of how people look at Christianity and not come off biased.
That is important. I was thinking that the whole while Duke was talking.
Yeah. So now
that was dope.
Now we can go back to where we were.
But let's get into detangling the Black entanglements and detangling the Black agenda. So the name of this discussion is Black Entanglements Part 2, because we did do Part 1, whereas we discussed the Nick Cannon debacle, the entanglement that Black people have been having with the so-called Jewish community, the accusations that Black people are anti-Semitic. We talked about the LGBTQIABCDEFGH movements and its current intertwining or co-opting, some would call it, of the Black Lives Matter or the movement for Black Lives that is currently taking gained a lot of steam. But tonight, so one thing that we didn't do, I don't think, when talking about the Nick Cannon is that we didn't necessarily talk about the solutions of how do we protect our personalities, the people who are out here, delivering our narratives, the people who entertain us, the people who are who can be the keepers of the culture, if they can only have some type of insulation from white capitalism and the backlash that comes from that when they speak the truth. And I made a statement. I don't know if it was on the last live stream or maybe it was just in a conversation we were all having, that Nick Cannon had a lot more power than he thought he had, due to the support that he had from the grassroots and the support that he had from his viewers alone. people like me who weren't necessarily interested in Cannon's class had got a phone call and said, "Tune in to Nick Cannon. He's talking your talk." However, because he's very new at it, and they started getting to him, and as Cleo pointed out, he didn't get any support from his peers. And we can talk further about that, but what are y'all thoughts on it?
I think what you said is true. He did not recognize the power in that we as a community did have in various different pockets, because not all of us think and operate the same way. Contrary to Joe Biden's belief. But beyond that, what I believe is that there hasn't been enough proof of our power when it comes to protecting individuals like us. And so the decisions that he made, I don't fault him for, as far as his recanting and going back and becoming more docile in his particular approach, if you will, because even when it comes to someone as recent as Colin Kaepernick, and even when this whole kneeling debacle, Colin Kaepernick did not have our full support as a community. Like, there was not enough of us ready to stand up and deny NFL its resources and its viewership and whatever other ways that we interact with this particular business complex, in order to make sure that this Black man was not whiteballed because of his particular passions and love and valueship of the overall Black community, right? There's numerous more examples of individuals who speak up for us, even as controversial as he is, but there was moments before his particular transition with Kanye West, where Kanye West would talk about and openly say George Bush does not care about Black people. And then there was a numerous amounts of pockets that were presented and shown that did not support Kanye West. Even Obama said that Kanye West is an effing idiot at one point, as Kanye West thought he was speaking up and standing up for Black people.
Well, no, I mean, I think we went over last time that we can't necessarily put Nick Cannon on the cross, so to speak, for his decision. I think now is more about the solutions and protecting another Nick Cannon. One thing that makes Nick Cannon different from Colin Kaepernick is that Colin Kaepernick did not have the ability to start his own football league. Basically, Nick Cannon has the ability. I won't say has the ability to produce his own shows. You know what I'm saying? Well, and many of us have abilities as far as communications and broadcasting that never existed before.
Well, when it comes to
where we are in time, so I think the solutions are that we understand the power in controlling our own narrative and try to support as much independent Black narratives as possible, because we don't have to necessarily start boycotting Viacom if we never was paying Viacom too much dust to begin with.
Well, along with those practical solutions, which I agree with, Kashama, I always go back, maybe because I'm a behaviorist, to deconstructing why grown folks this late in the game in year 2021, Black folks are not automatically, doesn't have an automatic impulse for defending the likes of Nick Cannon. How come that's not an automatic thing? How come either we're immobilized about doing it or we have to think twice about doing it? I think we've already covered one of the culprits that gets in the way of us thinking clearly, and that was what one of you brought up about the football player, who publicly talked about the trans as these men, meaning I can't do it. I can't stand up for Black people because. There's a lot of people like him who are paralyzed when it comes to the concept of being pro-Black and respecting Black people and advocating for Black people. And I don't think that we deconstruct that enough. I don't mean we, meaning us three, but as a collective, we don't deconstruct that enough and honor that and acknowledge and then resist that and teach against it, because that's one of the reasons why we're here in the year 2021, still talking about fighting for our rights or for our power and or stepping up for a Black man who has had our back. I mean, it would have been great if way back during the George Bush days when Kanye said what he said, that we use that as a teaching moment as a people to understand, okay, when somebody does something like that, we need to step up demonstratively as a people on a collective basis to have their back, so they won't one day go crazy and marry a very well-known prostitute.
Two comments that I want to highlight. One, thank you for that correction, Adam. Obama called Kanye a jackass, not an idiot. Correction. But two, Lowell commented and said that if that support for Cannon or anyone is not organized in all caps, it is inconsequential. In general, our movements lack organization, which is applied with boycotts and strikes and such. So my comment to that is similar to what Dr. Monago just pointed out. I think there's also a question about. I've known Black people to be very organized when they want something on the behalf of other people. I've known Black people to be very organized within LGBTQ movement spaces. I've known Black people to be very organized inside of feminist spaces. I've known Black people to be very, very organized in terms of even Kamala Harris at this particular time. Like, so I think the question for me is why is it that there's this inaptitude or unwillingness to be organized when it comes to a very pro-Black, a very forget everyone else. This is the specific agenda that I am engaged with at this particular time. And I think for me, it's also about wondering about what starts in the womb. As an educational person, I sometimes get called out to teach young minds, and I see the interactions that these children have with each other and how they've also internalized some of the concepts that their parents have had about Black trauma. When Black trauma happens inside of an anti-Black society, you don't treat it as just like, Joe and Davon and Ariana disappointed me. You don't treat it that way. You treat it as if Black people have hurted me, and therefore I do not have the resources or capacity to uplift and value or protect or want to speak to Black people at the end of the day because of it.
Well, one thing I don't. Well, okay, I agree with everything that you're saying. One thing that I think we're missing though is that I keep talking about how to recognize power. With the case of Nick Cannon, his audience was not your run-of-the-mill scared Black people trying to accommodate whites. Nick Cannon's audience was the vocal minority of Black people who will go in and say whatever the hell is on their mind in regards to white power. These are the same people that are listening to Professor Griff. These are the same people who are listening to Farrakhan. In fact, Nick Cannon is the baby of the crew. So what I'm trying to get us to realize is that we have to know who we're dealing with. The same brothers that pile up on Sunday and watch football mindlessly are not the same brothers that are tuning into Cannon's class. And when we talk about being organized, yeah and no. All right. Organization is always good. And those of us who lead should always seek to be organized. But when it comes to the masses, they ain't always organized. A lot of times they act according to the direction that they are being funneled into. And we have to learn how to be strategic and to use power in that way.
We should have a show one day that literally deconstructs what you're saying, Kashama, because without going any further, we have a lot of power in our hands, but we don't have a lot of self-respect on a collective basis. So that power is used toward white supremacy, whether it's actively involved behavior in white supremacy or paralysis in the face of a threat, going into paralysis and not resisting. Or like the brother football player saying, all lives matter. So, why step up just for Black folks, even though Black people are the main ones murdered by the cops, which is what Kaepernick was resisting. Let's forget that. We do not want to offend white folks.
This is a little bit off subject, but it's not off topic. It's like the people of Atlanta just had a major opportunity their way where Black people had the chance to really demonstrate power with the DA's race that just happened. This brother by the last name of Ford, the same DA who has been threatening them cops who killed Rayshard Brooks, bringing them on charges. I mean, serious charges, doing serious time. Black people were supposed to get behind that brother and make sure that he was reelected. That brother was reelected by like 60,000 votes. I'm sorry, by less than 50,000 votes in Fulton County, a county with over 500,000 Black adults eligible to vote. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, you had people like Killer Mike and T.I. talking about get out the streets, don't participate in these rebellions, go to the voting booth, go beat them up at the voting booth. But where were any of them when this man needed to be reelected? Why are we not using the power that we do have? And I'm not one to get up here and act like you can fix all your problems with voting. But damn it, when it's time to vote, when you actually got somebody that's giving you something tangible and putting one of these race soldiers, nailing them to the cross, you better get up off your butt and keep them in office, because you don't get that every day. Judge Olu Stevens up in Kentucky, y'all better get off y'all butt and make sure that man keeps his job, because he made sure that Breonna Taylor's boyfriend didn't get railroaded. I've seen it happen plenty of times with my own eyes. I've seen black people get positions in cities that are majority black, at agencies and organizations that got none but black people in it, and everybody got their back and they scared to move.
Right. So what you're talking about, I believe, is very important, but I think is it erases the various different ways that black people have to interact with certain systems. I mean, even the voting particular system is a very traumatic experience for a lot of us. I believe we were talking about at one point having a discussion just on how young people interact with voting booths. If we talk about like the quote unquote majority that can help push particular concepts, but even when it comes to voting, like that's not something that is really taught in our particular school system on how to do that particular process, because I was completely misled when I went to go vote for my first time. And on top of that, our community as a whole has a toxic relationship with voting. Like there's no other way to put it. Like our community has not had a lot of time to we have not made the space to process exactly how do we want to interact with this particular system of voting, with democracy, of how we want to live it peacefully with America. I mean, we got to think about it. I mean, again, even the system of democracy is not something that our community came up with. This is not how our community said this is the society that we want to live in. This is the society that we were essentially adopted into, stolen into, and this is where we're at now. And a lot of us have some concerns, regrets, and anger about how do we move about this particular system. And a lot of us also have no faith in it. So, I mean, people can show up to vote for whoever, but if you have no faith in the particular system, you're also going to be pushing whatever in the booth.
Well, you shouldn't have faith in. What'd you say, Cleo?
We have a lot of comments I want to.
Yeah, I see.
After you finish, Sham, I want to read off.
Yeah, well, let me tell you this real quick. You shouldn't have faith in anything that you aren't controlling. That's the problem. Voting has become a ritual for black people, as opposed to something that we intentionally do to get certain results and outcome. That's what politics is about.
I'm going to give a controversial example of what you're saying, Kashama. At least I think is an example. And I'm going to be attacked for this, so get ready and But the Black women vote movement, the Black women vote movement is a movement that talks about the importance and the power of the Black women's vote. And I agree that it's important that Black women are powerful and step up everywhere that they can and compensate for a history of marginalization and sexism and misogyny at all times. But what bothers me about that is that along with a system that incarcerates and attacks Black men and kills Black men, there's hardly any mention from those sisters about Black men, encouraging Black men to vote and talking to Black men about the importance of voting in a demonstrative way. They keep enjoying their Black women vote, Black women rock, Black women do all these things. And I understand that. And I think that Black women do rock and should continue to rock. But some of you have sons, brothers, husbands, and they're looking at the system that marginalized them. And now they feel marginalized by these tendencies of no acknowledgement of what Black men are going through. One of the side effects of Black men's feelings and anxiety is, well, I won't go into that. That's too much to go into right now. But I just want to mention that we have these different silos and sectors that create paralysis and prevent us from coming together as one group to defeat a common enemy or properly address our issues with each other so we can create space for each other instead of further dividing each other by creating silos.
See, that's why I love. That's why I love Neely Fuller, because he always, like you, Cleo, he always stresses on intentionality. Like he's always asking you to ask yourself, why are you doing something? Black girls rock, black girl magic. Why? Black girls won't be rocking or doing nothing if black men don't survive. Because you won't have black women or black men or nothing if black men and black women don't survive to make them. Point blank.
Yeah.
So let's stop all this. You know, I mean, yeah, it's useful sometimes, but when it comes down to this politics, we need to forget about all that black boy joy and black girl magic. We are black people, and there are tangible, intentional, grown-up things that need to be on our agenda, as opposed to rocking and being magical and feeling good about ourselves.
But in the conversation of solutions, I think what a solution for me is about creating intentional spaces where Black men and Black women are able to actually have dialogue about their particular grievances with one another. Because at this point, the grievances are just so big that no one's listening to each other. No one's no one's operating from a space of rationality. No one is operating in a space of logistics either. And so when these issues arise, like there's really issues on both sides of the board, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I see, and we're at a space now where it's impossible to move forward. Now, as far as how to create those spaces, one way that I'm always a fan of is really the dinner table. I feel like we forgot how to do that as a real family unit. And what I mean by that is, I have an example. I have a friend who's who's biracial, actually, but he tells me about his story growing up. And the father is white, and the father made a doctrine at their particular dinner table that they cannot have any discussions about race because it gets quote unquote too complicated. And for Black people, Black men and Black women, my irony of pointing that out is that I know many Black men and Black women who don't articulate that, but absolutely feel the same way, that it gets too complicated, that it's too complicated to bring my child in this particular dialogue, that I don't want to talk to them about what's going on in this world. I want them to be free and happy and blah, 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 blah. And we have to get rid of that particular paradigm amongst ourselves because it makes absolutely no sense.
And when, you know,
and it makes
Cleo,
sense
I come from,
but
I come from, am I okay? My bad, Cleo. But I understand a lot of that, particularly because me coming from the deep South, I come from people who I know have had to quit school in the second, third grade to go work in cotton fields and tobacco fields. So the idea that a lot of us, when we left those lives, when my grandma left Georgia and, you know what I'm saying, and was able to, you know, put her children through school and all that stuff, there's the idea that a lot of Black people had that I just want my children to be children. I want my children to be able to enjoy life and be a healthy child. And I have to deal with all that Black shit till they get grown, till they actually have to deal with it. But the mistake that we're making is that it's to a point to where our children are not insulated from this stuff. We integrated the schools, they're exposed to it there. The TV got 5,000 channels on it, and 4,998 of them are anti-Black. So it's to a point that, now we have to realize that didn't work because we got generations of Black people who are completely unprepared for this world. But I get the logic of where it came from because I came from those people who wanted their children to be kind of insulated from that stuff. People who almost saw their siblings get lynched and stuff didn't want me to think about that.
I get the logic of it too, but I also want to underscore what you just said is that it wasn't a effective solution. It wasn't a effective or helpful, well-intended, but not a good solution to not talk to Black children about what they're dealing with in the society, because when they become victims of racism, which is going to happen, even when they watch TV, they get confused or they become paralyzed, and or they're anti-Black enough. They pick the white doll over the Black doll, metaphorically, and become anti-Black, which the media reinforces. But I want to go over some of these comments. There's been a lot of them. Many of them are very powerful, as usual. Okay, I'm sorry. There's so many of them. I'm trying to make sure I don't miss any of them that I've seen already. Okay. I'll just read this one. We already covered this, but according to Mr. Williams, or Miss Williams, I don't know if A is a male or female. I should not be presumptuous. But Nick Cannon has not always been associated with a conscious audience. He himself has not been in this space, but yes, he learned very quickly the power that upheld him. Now he is trying to smote his voice out. Mr. Gaskill says that demonstrating the difference between effective and ineffective public communication regarding challenges to power is very empowering. I think Dr. Manago's CTC is effective at that. Of course, I agree with him on that. I think at the midst of sounding self-promoting, the bottom line is that we need strategies to decompress and deconstruct what's wrong so we can get beyond it and become more effective. And that's what CTCA aims to do. Adam mentioned that we should discuss how defunding the post office is racist, particularly how it impacts voting. And we should probably talk about that in a moment because it's true. And Mr. Denny says, I vote, but how can we tell Black or working class people that voting matters when our material lives have been degraded? This is like telling someone to believe in this country when the country continues to shit on us. Mr. Williams says, we've not always been aware of the truth in Kashama. And yes, you are right between OnlyFans accounts and so many other idioms, and we have money and power at our fingertips. It's sad to say we only use it when it's convenient. Duke, he said your comment was awesome. We put this on the screen, awesome. And we're growing comfortable with being uncomfortable. I don't think we're comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think we're familiar with being uncomfortable. If we were comfortable, we'd be healthier. We're not comfortable, which is why we do things that are not healthy for us. Terry says that Blackness is an experience without a destiny. He's quoting Francis Fanon. And Mr. Williams says, I guess he's referring to my comments about me saying it's going to be controversial for me to say that only talking about Black women magic and never ever mentioning men is problematic. So he's saying, Doc, it's not controversial at all. Black women are not pushing Black men. It's almost like they don't want to be associated with Black men. Very much why Harris's nomination brings me anxiety, because she has put away so many of us, Black men, as if that record has been wiped away. Kashami's getting ready to say something?
Well, no, I was going to say that's Brother Avis, who was on the show last time. He had called and joined in. You were saying you didn't know who that was. But
Diva spelled backwards. Okay, yeah. I remember him.
Oh, Avid. Yeah, that's right. Avid, not Avis. What Avid said is very that's deep. When he said that it's almost like they don't want to be associated with Black men. And I will put this out there because first of all, this is not to minimize Black women's struggle at all. I know that Black women have been attacked as Black women within their own right. But what I will say is that there is a certain type of attack that hits Black women because of their proximity to Black men. And I'll give an example of that with the N word. In many cases, you hear the N word, you hear it's like in a masculine sense. And when a white person or white supremacist or whoever wants to call a Black woman an N word, they'll usually put some type of female adjective behind it. They'll call her an N word B or N word this or N word that. And there is this idea of Black male proximity. But then again, that's within a group of people because the men and the women are counterparts of themselves. However, I think Black men have represented much more of a physical threat to white power because of that's just how gender has tended to work on this planet. The men do all and the women tend to do other things. So because of that physical threat that has always existed, and what Dr. Wilson points out as that genetic threat that has always existed, I think there is a measure of a certain proximity to Black men that some Black women subconsciously see themselves as being better off without.
I'm prepared to talk about Cleo.
Go on.
I was just going to say.
I was going to real quickly say that we're going to have a woman, at least one, if not more, as a regular part of our broadcast, y'all, because it's all male. I just got finished giving a critique about something that's very popular among Black women, and they're really enjoying it, as opposed to simply feeling victimized and marginalized. They're enjoying this Black women's magic moment, which is a response to an immediate history of oppression and marginalization. And as I said before, I honor and acknowledge it, but you can't just keep doing it, sisters, and that's it. Because like I told somebody last week who kept acting like trans people would have killed more than anybody. You saying that where black men's bodies have been piling up forever, and you have a murder group that's being not acknowledged. And that's kind of a contradiction to a fight for justice, even including human justice. But we got to bring a sister on here or more to be able to challenge us if we need to be challenged on perspectives we have about things that are relegated to women, like the black women's power and voting and magic and all that stuff.
Oh, no.
And AKA and Kamala Harris and
we're getting into that. That's why if y'all notice, we haven't really had a transition moment because we're naturally transitioning into this whole Kamala election 2020. As some black people say, what options do you have? What's the option? What's the alternative?
Well, there's two. Wait. There's two sisters. I want to say this real quick. There's two sisters who just raised their hands. One is Dr. Sharice Nelson, and one is a Queen from Black Box, and they want to come in. So we need to let them in. We need to do that, brother. We got to be responsible since we're going to be addressing sisters. They're here. So, Adam, could we show them how to get these sisters in? And we got a lot of other stuff to talk about before it's over. So let's make sure that they know that. But we want to hear from them. So how do we get Sharice in Black Box or Queen into this conversation, Adam? Do we have the link? Okay.
All right, the link has been up there for people.
Do you see the link, Sharice? You could put the link on the page too, Adam, so they can see it on Facebook. Because I don't think they see it in this space here because they're not here yet, so I don't think they see it.
Cortez is calling her Kilmala.
Yeah, I call her Obama, but anyway. They can't see it. Queen says she don't see it.
It's there. I'm seeing people say it's there, and I see the comments.
I'll put it on the screen. You probably don't feel like doing a bunch of typing, but at least you'll see it. That's how we get you sisters in, Sharice and Queen. Anyway, we're going to continue talking while we wait on you. What are you getting ready to say?
So I just wanted to say that I'm prepared to do this discussion almost all day. And the first thing I want to say is that when we're talking about the relationship between Black men and Black women, I think that the first thing is to move away from the social media particular context of how this conversation is going, because I noticed on social media there's a lot of vitriol and hate and anger and lack of rationality. However, in my personal life, that particular these discussions don't show up nearly like that, and we have these more nuanced dialogues, but at times on social media is completely irrational. But one thing that I want to point out is if we're talking about the idea of Black women wanting to move away from Black men as far as a social context, I absolutely do believe that's true, at least according to some of the social media and dialogues I've been having with women. But sometimes it gets extreme. Mind you, even the very first pattern of it, the statement itself is extreme. But there are Black women out here talking about some kill your sons and don't have sons. You have abortions. If you don't birth your oppressor, don't do these particular things when it comes to having a child. And there's no doctoral, if you will, dialogue, no observational dialogue about how violent and unruly this particular thought process is. But it seems Dr. Sharice Nelson has joined us. Hello.
Hey guys. Can you
Hi.
hear me?
We'll hear you.
Hey sis, how you doing?
Hey, I appreciate y'all for letting me join on the spot. I really, really appreciate it.
Not a problem.
Well, thank you. Did you have any thoughts or want to add or anything that popped up? We're here.
Absolutely. So I went on a rant this morning on Facebook. Because let me first, before I say what I said in the rant, I want to say to you guys, I appreciate the even-handed approach that you're having in the conversation. I think what we have to be careful of is that we keep having conversations on the extremes. And every time we have a conversation on the extreme, everybody leaves and walks away upset, and nothing gets accomplished. And
Yeah.
so what the rant I went on this morning is the idea that the oppressor's tool is to get us to continuously argue with one another, regardless of what it is. And we do this every generation. And one of the things that we do every generation that drives me absolutely bananas is that we relitigate integrationalism versus separatism. We litigate it every generation. And what I'm saying is that at some point we have to come out of that cycle of litigating that. We have to come out of the cycle. Now, I'm not saying that you can't push for liberation, that you can't push for separatists, that you can't even push for further integration. I'm not saying that people can't have their positions. What I'm saying is that we cannot be vile inside of our own communities and attack one another every time. The Jews don't do this, right? The Latinx folks don't do this. I worked on a campaign when DACA was getting signed, and I never knew El Salvadorians didn't like Mexicans until I started working with them. But when it was time to get to that courthouse, they was unified. And it's like we can't find a way to ever get unified. And that to me is the problem. To me, the problem is not the problem is not whatever these issues are. I agree with Dr. Manago, especially. She is definitely Obama, right? Like I absolutely that they can stomach that the Black experience has to be then watered down in some way for the mainstream to stomach it. And I don't disagree with that at all. However, my point is that we are fighting a structure. White folks create structures to oppress us, and we're fighting a structure. So who do we have and what our options are now, right? Are we going to use the structure to then put our voices in the structure and then push it for change? Or are we going to stand on the sidelines and continue to criticize the structure, a structure that they've been using to oppress us for years? So that's my piece and my sentiment on this. As to this level of extremism from Black women, I truly believe that it's a pendulum swing, right? Is that there are sets of Black women who for generations have watched their grandmothers, have watched their mothers be oppressed. And now that they have some level of voice, it's a pendulum swing. I think it's dangerous. I think that if Black women get behind this, we are doing further damage. But I think we need to stop and recognize, people hate when I quote this, but Beyonce's Lemonade was just so expansive for me, because it talked about how Black women are holding pain from generations ago. And if we can't find a way to let go of that pain and love Black men for where we are right now, then we're going to keep traumatizing one another. And that's all I have to say.
I thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
As you were talking, I was thinking, because it's like I have had to, being in this line of work and also being in close proximity to Dr. Cleo Manago as well as Dr. Thomas Curry's work, I've had to look up data and statistics on are Black men as fucked up as as the media and everything else and the experiences would have you believe? And the data does not correlate to the particular way that we operate within our communities. And one thing that I've noticed is not only is there this particular narrative that Black men are quote unquote not needed or useless in our communities, but of course we've also always had the conversation about Black women being quote unquote too violent, too angry, or mean, or not loving, or something, or beautiful in our particular concepts. But everything that we need to know, I believe, is the fact that none of these particular narratives came from us. Neither one of those narratives, that Black men are the most violent or Black women are the most angry or unbeautiful, none of those conversations came from Black people. We regurgitate these particular things, but again, it is a systematic structure, and a lot of us keep falling for the okie doke and traumatizing each other as a result. Brothers.
One other thing I will say on that piece is I have a piece coming out in the Impactor at the end of the month, and it's called "Racism in the Middle of in My Romantic Relationships." And I talk about the idea of the influx Black women feel, right? I'm wrong to celebrate my wins because then I put the Black man down, right? Like I go through this whole thing of how racism is in the center of our romantic relationships, and romantic relationships are difficult as is, but it's literally have been in the center of my romantic relationships, and I haven't realized it until recently. Well, not that recently, but I realized it until recently, right? And I start to see a pattern of it being in there. And so what happens is Black men feel like, how much nagging do I take from her because of racism? And Black women feel like, how much abuse do I take from him because of racism, right? It's like at the center, and it's the wheel. And I wrote at the end of the piece, I am willing to give up my romantic relationships if it means liberation for my people, if it means freedom for my people. If I can't be in a romantic relationship with a man because I'm fighting so hard to free us, I would prefer that, because my dream is not King's dream. My dream is that Black love is not a radical action. And we have to understand that every time we love one another, that is a radical action, because that's exactly what they don't want us to be doing. They don't want us to be doing. They want us arguing. They want us arguing one another. They want Facebook filled up with us hollering back and forth with one another. Great. You're distracted while I run these 12 other models on your behind, and make sure you don't vote, make sure you don't have representation, make sure you don't have resources, all of whatever it is. And so I think that is the thing that I'm calling many women in my generation to do is, what are you willing to sacrifice for forever freedom, is what I call it. What are you willing to sacrifice? Do you want to sit in the feelings that you have in the moment, or do you want to sacrifice what it means to be forever free, at least in a romantic space? Because I also feel like if there was some healing in that romantic space, we would be more united to fight them on the outside. But they've torn up the romantic space, and we love to talk about like the nuclear family. That's BS too, because Black folks been having kids outside of wedlock for forever, and that whole nuclear conversation, that's BS too. And it's not even African, because men in Africa had several wives and they got along just fine. So let's move away from that. However, we do not have any healing within each other. There's no place for us to go to heal with each other, and it's making it almost impossible for us to move on. And that's something else I just wanted to add on as well.
Well, I appreciate that, sister, and I want to respond to that shortly, because that's a whole nother topic that's not on our agenda, but it's a very important topic. I want Black women and Black men to have love in our lives, to experience the lusciousness and the passion and the wonderfulness of love and romantic love. And I think along with our activism, along with our sacrificing, we need to and that's a whole other topic, we're going to get to it one day, co-create spaces that can result in Black people removing the dust so we can fall back in love with some of the most beautiful creatures of figure of speech, creatures on earth that everybody else wants. Everybody's chasing us down. They got commercials and everything, and us chasing white folks down because they want their hands on Black beauty. We need to be able to get our hands on Black beauty because it's ours. But don't get me started, because that's not on the topic. But I want what you said to occur, and along with that, for us to consciously create space to love each other deeply and profoundly like we deserve, even if it's in a polygamous relationship, like you said about Africa, or whatever. I mean, because I've seen polygamous relationships, and sometimes it's 8 people getting some love. You know what I'm saying? 8 people fighting. And I want us to get some love, because we deserve that while we're alive. And I do work along those lines. I counsel couples. I counsel Black couples so they can stay together if they should. Some of them they should have did it. That's a whole nother night. But I want to have relationships with each other. I mean, and I want you, Jerice, to have the man of your dreams, and freedom, and liberation, and critical thinking, and all of that. I love seeing a person on a Black person's arms. It makes me crazy.
It's beautiful.
There's this idea of love, and I can't quite remember the culture that it's referenced from, a West African, West Central African culture, whereas the idea of romantic love between partners is not necessarily the same as we view it over here. There is a general love for the collective, for your people, for your collective people. And the general love that you have for your collective people translates into the relationships that you have in your immediate family, that is with your spouse, your partner, your children, your parents, whomever. I think it's important that we understand, ideas such as love, hate. There's a lot of abstract ideas that have been so shaped by our oppression that it's important that we expand our minds. And that's interesting what you said, Dr. Nelson, because you actually separated that white notion of romantic love. You separated that from that greater love that you have for your people. And what I want to challenge all of us to do, because this is something that I have to challenge myself to do as well, to not to always think of romantic love and that greater love for my people as two separate things. I think that one of the solutions, we're talking about solutions tonight, one of the solutions is for us to find a way to build a bridge and to merge that idea of greater love and subjective love.
Yeah.
I earlier in the conversation I had mentioned the colonization of imagination, but what this conversation has revealed to me is that we have to decolonize our romance, our perception of romance, and that is a whole nother bucket. But I love what has happened here, and for our people, we have to recognize. I feel like every day of the week needs to be dedicated. You know how people have leg day, gym, leg day, chest day, all that. Be like, this day is decolonization of imagination. This day is decolonization of education. This day is decolonization every week. So we get where we need to be as a people. And it sounds like a joke, and I laugh about it here to keep from crying, but this is the work that's needed. It's the strategy. It is developing the strategies and sticking to it. Because too oftentimes, like, we just have children, or we just fall in love with absolutely no strategy on how we're going to love and protect that individual, or navigate with that individual when shit gets rough. We have to have strategies about how we plan to affirm each other, because this is a world that is about de-affirmation of Black people.
Well, go on, Dr. Nelson.
Yeah, and I think the thing that Mr. Sankofa said, because I cannot pronounce your first name and I do not want to butcher it.
Nkashama.
Say it again, Dr. Managa.
No, you don't play with him like that. It's just Kashama, the end is silent.
I can't even believe Cleo set you up like that, Dr. Nelson. But go ahead.
I'm just playing with you, go.
He playing with me because I always mispronounce his name. That's why he doing that.
She's victorious.
You should be happy tonight. I'm doing good.
Yes, you are, sister. Yes, you are.
What you call him, Mango?
Yes.
Yeah.
All the time. Because he's sweet. He's a sweet. He has a sweetheart. Sweetheart for his people. But anyway, what I was going to say was this. What I said this morning on a live was that we are master creators. That other folks create, right? And I don't believe white folks create. I believe they invent. And I think there's a difference between creating and inventing. And like I said this morning on a live, and I said on Facebook, white folks just invented the patent office to steal everything that we created. Okay. And we are the master creators. I believe other people create, but we are the master creators. And this whole idea about the decolonization of these pieces is about taking back our mastery. And I think that is the biggest, I think that's the hardest part when you talk about the bridge of the bridge between Black women and Black men, or bringing back this love and putting them back together. I really believe is about owning our mastery again. However, the problem is that when Kamala, for example, who's for all intents and purposes a Black woman, when Kamala is out there, regardless of how you feel about her, you can't then make her less than what she is. She's still a Black woman at the end of the day. And so it makes it difficult to create a bridge when there is a quote unquote win for Black women, or what Black women perceive to be a win. And then Black men say, nope, that's not a win, right? Or then we get to quantifying wins. That's when I think it's difficult for us to take back our mastery. We can be critical of Kamala without questioning her Blackness. We can be critical of her without questioning her blackness. Are there issues there? Are there problems there? Yes. Like I said this morning about Obama, because I gave him as another example. Obama made the decision that inside of the democratic system that he was going to change the structure, that he was going to needle and play with the structure, and he wasn't concentrated on helping the individual lives of Black people, but he was more about moving the structure. Now, you can agree with that position, or you could disagree with that position, but you can't discredit that he played with a system that has disproportionately helped Black folks, and there's policy examples along the way. And so when you talk about building the bridge, I think that's what makes it difficult, is that regardless of how you feel about if it's a win or not for you on how you perceive it, give that other person room to make it feel like a win for them, so that's a building point. Like, I recognize it's a win for you. Okay, let's critique where the problems are and where can we grow from this place in love. But as soon as you start snatching wins from each other, right? Whether I get on this on here and say more trans folks have been killed than Black men, that's snatching wins or stuff from one another. And I think that, to me, is why it's difficult to collapse these two loves and feel like there's a bridge.
Well, I think the example you use, because if you said that, there are more trans people being killed than Black men, that just wouldn't be true. But in regards to Kamala Harris, okay, so the thing about being Black, I don't think it does Black women.
Official transition too, by the way.
Yeah, it is very good. I think it does a terrible disservice to Black women. One, somebody said that Kamala is good that she's where she is because my daughter can look up at her and see something that she'll be. And I'm like, no, she won't. Your daughter won't be Kamala. Your people come from Mississippi, your wife come from Georgia. Your daughter won't be Kamala. Kamala has a unique story, and it's her story, but it is not a Black story. It is not the Black story that has shaped and has created the material condition that we live in today. It is the story. Go ahead, say something, Cleo, please.
I have a process question. What else do we have on the agenda? I'm saying this because this is getting, I have a lot to say about this, and I'm not going to say it because it would definitely derail what we have planned.
The only thing we're going
one more.
Only thing we were going to talk about was
Breonna Taylor.
We were going to talk about reparations as well, and we were going to talk about Breonna Taylor, the billboard, the militant response, as well as there's something on repatriation.
Okay, because it's 8:30, and I have a lot to say about the Obama. That's what I call her, the Obama.
I really do think that Kamala is probably going to take us towards the end of this. If it be just being honest, because if we're not going to have enough time to really unpack every other part. And
I'll just say,
this is more important.
Because Shama, were you in the middle of a thought? I don't want to stop you from your thought.
No, this is more important. It's not every day that we get a sister like Dr. Nelson on here to talk with us and to share her insight. And this is extremely current and relevant. But what I was just saying is that I think it's a disservice to Black women to place Kamala up there and then say, this is you. This is representative of you. Nothing about her life I'm talking about her career now, not who she's married to. Nothing about her life and her career has been affirming of Black people or Black women. And I would disagree. And she's barely even identified as Black. And this not me questioning her. She's called herself Indian. She's called herself a woman of color. I'm so Black, I can't never go for nothing else. I can't get away with that man of color.
So let me tell you why. Let me present an alternate narrative. And I'm not disagreeing. I'm not backing up from what you're saying or disrespecting what you're saying. The reason that I say that she's of my experience is Kamala made a decision to go to a historically Black college and university. By immersing herself into that experience the same way Obama chose to leave Occidental College and go to New York and move in with his African sister. So because he understood there was something there that was missing. I would argue to you the same phenomenon is there for her. And by attending a historically Black college, by pledging, right, and if you can agree with pledging or not, or that whole thing, but by pledging a sorority, the first Black Greek sorority, the first Black female Greek sorority, there were choices that she made there, right? Now, I think my issue with Kamala has always been that she's an opportunist. And so when you see this vacillation of identity, I believe that vacillation is out of opportunity. I don't believe that's from not identifying as a Black woman. Because and the reason that I say this is because I'm from California, I'm from the Bay Area, and I remember when she was a prosecutor in Alameda County. And one of the things that was a huge deal was the fact that she demanded in almost all of her bios all the time to say that she went to Howard University. And people, that irritated people. They were like, why, you went to Hastings Law School. Like, why in your bio do you always talk about, this degree from Howard, blah, 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 blah. And it was a sticking point for her. I also say this, and I have law enforcement family. I have a cousin that was a district attorney, and I talk about this in my rant this morning as well. And one of the reasons that my cousin said she made a decision to get into the system was to change it, or to at least needle with it. And what I guess I see as to why I still feel like she's of a Black experience. It may not be yours and my Black experience, but she's of a Black experience because she decided to get into a system that she didn't have to get into. She was smart enough to be a defense attorney. She was pretty enough to get any kind of, by having a law degree and having her bona fides, she did not have to make a decision to get inside that system. She got inside that system. She made strategic decisions inside of that system. Now, we may agree with them or not, but to say that she's not of the Black experience, I think that's a bridge too far. One of the other reasons that I made my niece watch her is because I wanted to show my niece that you're Black doesn't have to look like somebody else is Black. And the reason it was important for me to do that with my niece is because my niece has an African last name. Her father has an African last name, but there's not much cultural connection. And so all the time she gets questions about this last name, but doesn't have a strong cultural connection. So I wanted to show her that, yes, Aaliyah Iwoma, you are Black and Kamala Harris is Black, and your Black narrative doesn't have to look like everybody else's for you to be Black.
And we have a couple of, I mean, I want to hear you do, but I want to acknowledge we have a couple of comments that I think are interesting that we should acknowledge. But go on and Duke, say what you have to say first.
So I just wanted to say that I'm of the perspective, similar to you, Dr. Nelson, that Black people are nuanced. And part of my navigation is recognizing that anti-Blackness is a spectrum, and that we all fall on this particular spectrum at some place, point, or way or another. And Kamala has the blessing and the burden, if you will, of being a public figure. So her particular anti-Blackness is going to be scrutinized and placed in a particular pathway for us to see and intersect and dissect and have opinions about. What I recognize is that just her by herself, as you stated, is a symbol of representation for little girls. And I don't have to question that, because I know growing up, there were lots of Black male figures, whether or not they were agreeable or disagreeable, that were just there that I could see in particular positions of power, and even like as superheroes or not else, that girls did not have that. I had to recognize that as a much later age, that girls, specifically little Black girls, did not have the same access to particular representation, whether they were good or bad. So I recognize that, and I recognize the duality of that. Far as with Kamala, I don't know if I would say that she is not of the Black experience. I don't have that particular thought pattern or process when I think of her. I see a Black woman who made some decisions that make her life a little easier. To move forward as a Black woman. That's what I see.
Yep. I was gonna say that can be synonymous. I mean, Black people, move away from blackness to make their lives easier. That's the whole logic behind it. Don't
And
nobody.
that's a lot of Black people who do that, though. I mean, like, and
Yo,
when
I'm
I
saying
say that,
that's
I
the
mean
whole
that even in our
purpose.
local communal levels, like, there's a lot of Black people who decide, no, I'm not going to speak about particular issues because that's going to make my particular life difficult.
Yep.
And this job that pays me $38,000 a year is just great. Like, you don't have to be making a sublime amount of money in order to become a white accommodationist. And
Absolutely
Kamala's
not.
particular journey, huh?
Oh, I say
Kamala's
absolutely not. Keep going.
Yeah, I think Kamala's particular journey, again, is recognizing that it's inside of a bubble of anti-Blackness, right? And so her particular pathway, being a Black woman inside of a society that also teaches that Black men ain't shit and Black women have to go through this and blah, 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 she made decisions. And those decisions impacted various people in the community, not just Black men. She also had the Chauncey bill that was at risk. I don't know if any Black women were particularly heavily directly impacted by that, but I do remember there was dialogue about how that Chauncey bill was absolutely coming for the leagues of single Black women who could not
Wait,
get their
Chauncey bill was
children.
what, dude? Explain the Chauncey bill.
So that was about making sure that if children were late to school, then the parents would be fined and/or jailed for that particular grievance. And being
It absolutely affected
now
Black
that
women,
is
and she laughed about it. I'll mute
no,
now.
the reason it was.
I'm saying I don't know
this
the
is why
cases. That's why I
I'm
said.
from the right, but I'm from the area, so this Chauncey bill has really kind of irked me because there's deeper ties to it. So this is okay. I want to be as brief as possible. So the state decides how districts get paid or how districts get resources based upon the number of students that are in school. If the student is not on time or is late, they lose credit for even being there. So let's take it further. In the state of California, education is paid for primarily through property tax. And as we know, in Black and brown communities, we don't own, so that we're not paying high property taxes, or the property values are lower, so property taxes are not as high. So less money is being put into the school. So the Chauncey bill, it was deeper. If I can get these kids in school, then I can get more money in the system for them for the issues that they have. Now, if you know, the reason that she laughed about the Chauncey bill is because many people know that almost no Black woman was jailed. That what happened is that there was a hearing, and then there was a review of then what could be done to get that kid to school on time and what resources could be pulled to do it. Now, I wish I wasn't prepared, but I've dealt with this Chauncey thing before. So I have actual statistics for how many people got fined, how many people went to jail, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But
was there more than one sister that went to jail, Dr. Nelson?
It was more than one sister that went to jail.
That's more than one too many. I'm sorry.
And
you cannot justify throwing Black mothers in jail over some funding. I'm sorry, you can't do that.
I hear what you're saying, but what I'm saying to you is that it's a structure. We're fighting against the structure. Being upset for her. Wait a minute.
Slavery was a structure too, sis.
You could be upset with her, or you could be upset with her, and I'm not taking that from you. What I'm saying is you have to acknowledge that she was trying to wield the structure the best way she knew how. Now, you don't have to like it, and I get the fire and putting one Black woman in jail.
Can I say something?
Too many. I get all of that.
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
When you are born to a wealthy Brahmin Indian mama and a wealthy mulatto class Jamaican father who you don't even know, I don't expect you to have any best knowledge of how or what Black people need, because you're not Black. Not in the sense of our struggle and what we need in this country.
And
you just cannot get blood from a turnip. That sister's dark. That sister's a woman of color. She has African ancestry. There's a whole lot going on there, but she is not Black in the geopolitical sense in which we need to move forward. This stuff where we keep letting people who done grew up in white households and Indian households and never had a Black person feeding them nothing their whole lives, and then they get sent into our communities as these spies or doppelgangers for us or whatever they're supposed to be. This is a black man, this is a black woman, and they don't know nothing about no damn grits or hair bonnets or none of that.
But I disagree with that totally. She went to a historically black college. If you've gone to
you don't go to Howard to get blacker. You don't go to Howard to get blacker.
Sweetie, now be careful now, because you're talking to a Howard grad.
I'm not. I went to an HBCU. You don't go there to get blacker. You either black when you go, or you learn some college culture.
It's not about getting blacker. We can't say that. We can't say that everybody has to be of our exact experience to be black, because if that's the case, like I said on my rant this morning, none of us are pure African. None of us have claim to that. So
we're not talking about DNA.
Right, but
I never mentioned DNA. Right, I mentioned who raised her.
And what I'm saying to you is, she has had a maturation. She has attended a historically black college and university. She made a decision to come into a black community and work inside that black community. Decisions that she didn't have to make. Now, you can see her as a doppelganger all you want, and I'm not taking that from you. I'm saying, don't say to us that we are wrong for seeing her in a different way. That's what I'm saying.
You're not wrong.
Wait, please hold on. I want to do two things right now, because y'all gonna go back and forth forever. This is gonna be an A/B conversation about Obama. But anyway,
I love her though.
wait. What I want to do first of all, I have a comment about this too before I faint. Number one, number two, I want to read some of these comments real quick that people have made that's about this topic. Okay, where are we? Terry Siver says that I protect myself. I project my self-hate onto the ones I'm closest to. That's an interesting self-analysis, which I think, unfortunately, he's not unique in that. She or he, I'm not sure what Terry is, so I don't want to make no sexist assumptions. They'll acknowledge what they are. And Carl Tay say, white folks steal. And my niece, Amber White, is waving at me. Hi, baby. And Kenneth Taylor's agreeing with Dr. Nelson, saying that we are master creators. Stephen Gaskill says there's a need for friendship between black men and black women that precedes romantic interest. I would agree with that. Michael Presley says black people need to start loving their African features and what they see in the mirror. That'd be really nice. And Patrick Dilly says, how can we follow you, Dr. Nelson? So before you leave, folks want to know how to get some more fire from you at their whim. And someone says, Dr. Nelson, wow, but Senator Harris questions her blackness. Wow, I'm truly listening to you. Wow. And I am so appreciative of your point, and I am surely listening. And I'm going to go down to Garmelin Star Galliard. It said, black is a culture, not a race. It's an ideology. It's a political statement. They go on to say, black folks are constantly having a pissing contest on who's more down with us. I got something to say about that. I'm gonna go on. Omarosa went to Howard University too, but we don't praise her for being of the black experience or for black people. She's too dark. That's all I'm gonna say. Anyway, that's not my opinion, but that's what I think is affecting the situation.
Cleo, someone named Gamelin Star.
Yeah, I just read it.
No, he just put her mother is South Indian. South Indians are darker. They're considered the N-words of the Indian caste system. I'm going to say you are categorically false. She is of the Brahmin class, and they are of the high wealthy class. You are referring to, I believe they call the Dalits, the untouchables. They're darker than all of us. And no, that's not Kamala. But go ahead.
Let me just say this. Give my relatively abbreviated analysis of this, because we don't got time to get into my perspective at 8:39 on a nuanced level. But as I mentioned today on Facebook, and some of you may have seen it, when I was an undergrad, among the papers that I wrote, one was called The Various Colors of White Supremacy. And the purpose of that thesis was to alert us, or those who read it, that white supremacy is no longer just white. As a result of white supremacy being institutionalized in a norm and systemic and omnipresent and all over the place, media, etc., Black people who, most of us who have white people's first and last names because of enslavement, many of us have mastered being white supremacists, being anti-Black. And I mentioned that it was such a norm that Black people would do things that they think intellectually is Black affirming, but that feeds into a systemic white supremacist norm. For example, I mentioned that this is way before Barack Obama. This was over 30 years ago, that the first president of the United States was going to be either half white or have a white partner, or both. And the first vice president of the United States was going to be the same. Lo and behold, we have Barack Obama, who's half white. Lo and behold, we have Kamala, who's married to a white man. These are perceptions I had because I know how white supremacy works. Regardless of the kind of mentality and aims that Kamala may have, and that's a whole nother conversation, I believe she's being used, just like I believe Obama's being used. Now, you did mention a word that I think is relevant to Barack and to Kamala, which is opportunistic. They're opportunistic to get to high heights. I'm not sure, particularly in Obama's case, but what I know about Kamala as well, that they're getting to higher heights to transform things in behavior of defending, saving, and empowering Black people and reducing threats to Black life. I'm not sure that that's part of their agenda as they rise to these heights, particularly, frankly, when somebody goes home to a white person every night as part of their personal, intimate, body fluid experience. I'm not sure how much they love Black people. But I believe that people like Kamala and even Barack to an extent got caught up in making it to the top of white supremacy systems to become successful and achieve that. But I'm not sure that the achieving is going to trickle down to anything that's going to have Black people in terms of saving our lives. For example, and we'll see what Kamala does, because I believe she will become the vice president. When Sandy Hook and those white kids died from being murdered, Barack went. When there were stories about Black people, Black children dying, like in Chicago, he said Michelle or nobody came at all. And there's other examples of Barack's behavior, regardless of what he was doing systemically. Black people are somatic people. We are people that are healed or traumatized by what we witness and what we experience or don't experience. For example, Barack never demonstratively affirmed Black people in undeniable ways that we can actually see. It's one thing to do it behind a system that allegedly might trickle down into some benefit for us. But there was white accommodation on the optical level during the whole time, which almost psychologically compromises any capacity to be affirmed by anything that he's doing on a behavioral or emotional level. Kamala is going to be very, very problematic for Black self-concept while being the vice president, because she doesn't embody Black on Black love. She doesn't embody Black on Black affirmation. And that's my concern. There's other concerns too regarding her experience by being a legal powerhouse in the state of California. I'm from California too. I wasn't necessarily focused on Kamala, but I focused on the legal system there because I worked for the police department. So I just think that there's some woundingness that's going to occur and has occurred based on what it seems that Kamala represents and what Kashama just said about the Brahmin experience is real. So it just bothers me, and I'm closing out with this, that the Black people, that white people keep allowing and selecting to be in these powerful spaces, keep not being Black like you, Sharice, Black like me, Black like Kashama, Black like Duke. There's no ambiguity in our Black experience culturally. There is ambiguity, and I'm not saying the ambiguity makes them bad or good. That's not what I'm saying. I mean, you're born and you inherit your parents and you inherit your experience. I'm just saying that Black people don't know nothing about generally having a white mama and a white grandmama and white family members and growing up to that and experience that on a daily basis on a cultural. But we know what it's like to have a Black mama or Black culture and a predominantly Black culture experience. And people who have a nuanced experience that goes outside of Black culture are the kind of people that white supremacists keeps allowing to have certain places in the society. And it has a psychically and culturally damning effect, regardless of Kamala's intention or alleged intention, and regardless of Barack's alleged intention. So that's my concern on the surface level, though it goes beyond that. It goes into policy too, but we just don't have time to get into my policy concerns. I'm gonna talk about some of the more obvious issues that people see and that people are impacted by. And that's why I call her Obamala, because I think that she was chosen based on her genetic makeup by whiteness because she was less threatening optically and politically. And I also believe that she's the best person that the most powerful person that Joe Biden could have picked to win the election. That was a strategically powerful move because she's not too Black for some white folks. And particularly having a white husband who's going to wind up being, I joke and call him the first, white male first lady, even though I know he's a man, I'm just joking. But bottom line is that his position is unique and it's going to be highly visible. And the image of them is going to be highly visible and unusual in the fabric of our lives because of how unique she is and he is in that White House position. I hope I made
correct. So no, it makes perfect sense, and I don't disagree with what you're saying. I guess my question then becomes, do you use the tools that you have? If they want to raise your, so first let me deal with the thing about someone said questioning Black or she doesn't identify as Black, or the whole piece of that. I would like to say that there's oftentimes that folks have not thought I was Black. If I wear my hair a particular way, are you Puerto Rican? They love to make me anything else, and I'd be like, no, I'm blackity black. I'm as Black as they get. I mean, I got Black parents. I
have never questioned your Blackness ever.
Right.
Okay, so
right, but it happened a lot in childhood. I've darkened over time. And it happened a lot in childhood. My dad jokes all the time that he had to ask my mama, is this really my kid? Because I was so white. Like, people look at baby pictures of me and like, is that you? I'm like, yeah, that's me. So I guess
But your bride is Black, Dr. Nelson. I've been around you.
Oh yeah,
your
my mind is
a girl.
No. My mind is my mind is, but
your vibe.
Oh, my vibe.
I said your vibe.
Oh, my vibe. Yeah. Well, I guess my point to you is that, but that, and if I'm just going to be raw and honest, is that that's because over time I had to grow into that. I was the smart kid that, I was a smart kid. I was the one that talked white and all of these, there are all of these things. And so I think a piece of me was trying to always get a sense of validation from my own people about who I really was. Right. I used to fight just to prove, right? Like, if a girl said anything to me that I thought was outlandish, you're going to get these hands because I need you to know I'm of this culture. Right. So I guess I want to say on that piece, this whole about questioning that if you are in a white supremacist world, there is a process of questioning your Blackness, I think, at every level. I think I would say that even as a professor in what I'm doing right now, that I was teaching at white institutions and I almost questioned some of the very things that I know to be true because of the fact that they were denying my humanity every single day. Right. Luckily now I'm at Southern University. We got a whole other set of problems at HBCUs, but at least my humanity is not being questioned every day. And so when Kashama, when we get into these things or these things about or not Kashama, when Dr. Manago, when you talk about being used as a tool, my question then becomes, do we use the tools that are on the table or do we keep critiquing the tools? And I don't disagree that she was used. I agree with that totally. When you said Obama, I agree wholeheartedly. But I guess my question continues to be is, what do we do from this point? Do we continue to have this conversation, or do we try to push the tool that's semi more apathetic to hearing what we have to say than having a tool that's not going to hear us at all? And I guess that's where I am.
Let me just say this.
Go ahead.
Let me just say this real quick. And I know about time, y'all. I use tools. And I'm not, and not just knife and fork. You know what I'm saying? I'm talking about intellectual tools, grant writing tools, scientific tools. I use data. I use footnotes, but they don't use me.
Mm-hmm.
I use them. Just like I use my car. I use property that I own. I understand capitalism as a system. I know how to use it. And I know how to use it and do well in it. But it doesn't use me. Everything I've done, all that I've accumulated has been gone into Black people to transfer Black people with no doubt, because that's why I went to school. Everything I did is an investment in a blatantly Black agenda that I can show receipts for my investment in what I did with those tools actively, so I can never wind up being used and usurped and go from code switching to being the damn switch, or worse than that, to going from code switching to getting stuck on white code. Because I unconsciously have learned, which I haven't, thank goodness, I've deflected that, but because I've unconsciously learned that white is better, I unconsciously descend into whiteness inadvertently by behavioral practice, because I'm real clear about my agenda and I'm operating in that agenda. I could never do what Kamala did and take that job because of I mean, I was a cop for a minute and realized I couldn't do it because I could not be involved in the a murdering Black man machine. So again, there's a difference between using tools and being used by the tools. And I'm concerned about how much she has embodied the tools at home and at work. And I'm concerned that she's being used because she has become a tool as opposed to being a tool for us.
Correct. And so my question though is that so to your point, right? To me, you have to also remember I'm a political scientist, right? So so for me, it's like, I don't disagree with anything that you're saying, but for me, it's like, well, now I got to put the pressure up. You wanted this position. You played this game to get there. Now, we didn't make certain demands of Obama because he was the first and this and that and this, but we going to make them of you. And so for me, it's, I agree that it could be said that she's being used. I told you my issue with her is that she's opportunist. Me and my mother had this conversation. However, and I had this conversation because she was at Howard with a whole bunch of Black men, probably the smartest set of Black men she was going to be around. Didn't get with any of them. Left Howard, went back home to California, dated Willie for a while, dated other Black men, and then rolls on up. Right. So
dated who? Willie who? She dated Willie who, sis?
Willie Brown.
Dr. Nelson, you say she dated Willie. Who? Willie who?
Willie Brown.
Willie Brown, mayor of San Francisco, the married man. She dated him. I didn't know they were in a relationship. I didn't know that. I thought he was married.
Moving on.
So why are we saying they dated? I didn't know.
It's 8:53.
I guess my
heard
point is,
something.
My point is,
but I didn't think that.
Oh yeah,
moving on.
I don't want to get into her whole sex life. That's not what I'm here to do. What I am here to talk about though is the fact that she skipped over Black men, which is my point. She skipped over Black men to get a white man. That's my point. But what I am saying is that we are in a position, the way I see it, to make more demands of her because of the fact that she has this quasi thing going on. To me, we are in a position to make more demands of her, especially because if we look at the history of because I truly believe she wants to be president. And if we look at the statistics of the number of VPs that go on to be president, it's not that many, y'all. So if she wants to dip in, if she wants to ascend to the heights that she really wants to ascend to, she gonna need us if she want to really do it. And so so in my opinion, we have an ability to hold her feet to the fire if she wants to go to the places that she wants to go. And I say this especially for Black women who vote 90% Democratic.
All right, sister.
So I have something to say, please. Let me say this because I think I agree with you. Hold her feet to the fire, but I don't see the point in getting her where she is and letting her use us and supporting her, and then trying to hold her feet to some fire. Hold her feet to her fire now and let her know that, hey, if you don't dance to our tune, we are not supporting you, and we're not afraid not to support you. You're not black enough to make us support you if you don't have our agenda. And now that goes for the blackity black. If he had Val Demings up there, I'm from Florida, and I'll be the first person to drag Val Demings because I know what a snake she is. And she's darker than all of us. But she ain't black enough to make us support her. And she has a black husband. Thank you, Cortez. She ain't black enough to make us support her, and she's not promising any tangibles. That's not how politics work. That's how black people getting played for decades by the Democratic Party works.
I disagree that she's not producing tangibles. And the reason I disagree with about producing tangibles is Joe Biden very early on created an entire black plan. It's been circulated, it's been critiqued, it's been a whole bunch of things. And we can disagree on this. And I wrote a piece that's supposed to be coming out in the Journal of Negro Education that talks about proper funding to historically black colleges as one of the pillars of reparations. And so for me, I do not feel that. I do feel like there's a plan. I do feel like there's things that we can hold her to the fire on. And for me, again, politics is about the art of the possible. And it's and who we have in office is not possible to get shit from, just straight up. So for me, I rather have somebody in there that's possible that I can get something from.
Well, y'all, it is 8:56. And we have to prepare to wind down so Duke can be happy tonight because he don't like us to go too long.
I don't think Duke care tonight because this is good. Like with Dr. Nelson, we got to have you on again.
Well, I'll tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to do my closing statement, and y'all figure out what y'all want to do.
It don't work like that. Unity, dude.
What I wanted to really say, especially listening to you, I had something I wanted to respond to, and you said, "What do we do now?" And I think your question is just a paraphrasing of like, lesser of two evils. And I think for me, it is about expressing to my community the options or quote unquote options that they do have, but not brutalizing them for their choice or lack of choice in that particular dialogue. So what Black people decide to do with their vote is their business. And at the end of the day, it is absolutely that individual person's business. I encourage specifically people to get more involved with local politics because my belief and my path has been that local politics absolutely has a larger impact on our day-to-day lives as opposed to national. But in closing for Kamala, what I would say is that I believe that her feet need to be held more to the fire, as does everyone that's running for anything. Joe Biden, whoever needs their feet run to the fire. But I will also say that this isn't Kamala's first rodeo. Like, she already knows that this community does not support her as much as she thought that they would or could, because she lost the Democratic primaries. Well, had to drop out rather. And so she's aware. And I believe that is a matter of continue making her aware and what it is the solutions that she can offer or do in order to make sure that we are aligned with her particular goals. We all have the same goals. At the end of the day, making sure that we all have those same goals. So that is what I have to say about that particular matter. But I will say that this has been, I think, a really beautiful and productive discussion. I see some of the comments, and thank you so much, Dr. Nelson, for coming through. This was really, really great for me and my livelihood. So yeah.
I'll close out so I can give Kashama the last word, so he can gut me after I finish.
Don't even do that. No.
No, I'm just playing. I'm just joking. Let me be very clear.
I got you.
I want to say to you, brothers, I really appreciate the conversation. And I appreciate the conversation because it remains civil. We were able to have a real dialogue. And I think this is the problem. When I say, where do we go from here? We are not having this dialogue. We are yelling at one another, going back and forth. We are not having this dialogue. And Kashama, you may decide not to vote, or you may, however your dereliction. I probably, from a lot of your statements, you probably don't vote regularly anyway. So, I mean, and what I mean by not voting regularly is that this is what I mean by this. and let me be very clear, is that in political science, we use something called the propensity score. And the propensity score is a score that is used to decide how money is spent in elections, because they want to see who has voted consecutively, meaning that who has voted in the least in the last 3 elections. And so what I mean by that is, like, you not voting anyway. I would say that your propensity score for voting would be low, because you would not be somebody that would show up voting every time. So that's what I mean by not voting anyway. So I want to be very clear about that. And as a political scientist, sometimes I take that for granted. And so we have to recognize that there are newer voters that are coming into the system, and that we have to provide this kind of conversation and this type of nuance so that they can make an informed decision. We have to present all sides so they can make an informed decision. I'm not upset at anybody who's not going to vote. I'm not upset for anybody who decided to loot and riot when the George Floyd's killing was at its height. All I am saying is that we cannot fight one another in our positionalities. I respect your positionality the same way I expect you to respect my positionality, and respect the fact that I'm going to get on my soapbox, that I'm going to try to rally as many Black folks as possible to get to those polls. I just got off a call right before I saw y'all on this live, just scrolling through Facebook, about how we could get around barriers for voting, as far as at Black churches, having them be drop-off centers so we could put them in mailboxes in white neighborhoods, so the likelihood of them getting counted rises, right? Using the system to do that. So I just got off of a call having that conversation. So again, what I want to leave is with, first, you can find me and follow me at Dr. Janae, and that is spelled Janaye on Twitter. You can also follow me on Facebook, Sharice Nelson. It's spelled correctly here. You can also follow me on what is the other one with pictures? Instagram at Dr. Janae, Janaye. And so what I will leave with is that I am a person that I feel has a good grasp on the nuances of being Black. And what I don't want us to do in the community is ever vilify one another and give the oppressor what he wants.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. Appreciate it. I'm going to support Kashama having the last word. I'm going to just give my 2 cents here. I want to say real quickly, Dr. Nelson, that I have been accused, believe it or not, too, of acting white in my life, and not being quote unquote hood enough and stuff like that too. That's a whole other conversation. But being so darn analytical to an extent, I always got why they were doing it. So I didn't get mad at them for being concerned about that, because there were things they expected from from Black people that I wasn't doing. So I got it in terms of being intellectual and all that kind of stuff. In a white supremacist, mythologically based society, I'm never surprised at what Black people see, because we live in a society that traumatizes us and doesn't affirm us, and that makes us fearful of leaving each other, and each other not supporting each other. Because that's part of what makes us anxious, is that we feel like somebody else is going to reject us, including each other. So we feel like if we're too white, we're not going to like Black people. We're worried about that. And we're not worried about that because we're crazy. There's some material realities that have led to that kind of anxiety. But I want to mention that I just want to thank you again for coming. I hope you come here again. We want women to be here every week, frankly. And I'm just glad that you brought your perspective. And I appreciate what you said about Kamala, or Obama, as I call her. But I've already made my concerns clear regarding what's happening with that. But I also think we should vote. I also think we should think in the long term about what we can do if we play this system instead of ignoring this system, because it is the system that's out there that impacts our lives, and we need to attack it. And I don't mean in a negative way. I mean, we need to use it and try to get what we can get out of it, and also prove to ourselves based on experience that it doesn't work, as opposed to saying it don't work and we never even tried to work it. So I think that there's things we can do to try to grasp power, and that's another night. But I want to bring up, as I finish, I want Adam to bring Brianna's picture up. Because even though we don't have time to get into Brianna, I still want that sister to be seen on our live stream and affirm Oprah's interesting attempts to affirm the sister who was murdered, and just honor her, because one of the criticisms that some sisters have is that not enough focus have been brought on the demise of so many Black women under this system. So I just want to make sure that she's there for us to acknowledge, and we're going to talk about her in more detail in terms of why she's relevant to our discussion, possibly next time. But thank you, Adam, for bringing her up. But that's all I have to say, because I can go on forever. I'm gonna let Kashama take us out.
Well, thank you, Cleo, for pulling that.
Just real quick, I'm sorry. I see you tearing up, Dr. Nelson. I just want to say we love you. I wanted to make sure that that's recognized and clear and heard.
Thank you, dude. I was going to mention that as well. And I also want to say before you speak, Kashama, that we always have principled conversations. That's a part of our organizational strategy, is to be decent with each other and to listen to each other, because that's a strategy for transformation as far as we're concerned. And I see that you're moved, and I'm moved by you. Thank you.
And I just want to say her picture is hard. It's hard for me to see her.
Yeah.
It's just hard for me to see her.
I hear you.
Well, I was about to say thank you for putting that up there, Cleo, because it brings it all into perspective. This is why we do this. We brought to you Black Entanglements Part 2, Detangling the Black Agenda, and we had so many things on the agenda to talk about, but it turns out the most important solution, the most important thing on this agenda was getting Black men and Black women into the room to have a principled discussion, dialogue, and struggle if need be. And I keep expressing my appreciation for Dr. Nelson, because I need that perspective that disagrees and keep it principled. And I appreciate the fact that I can be as passionate as I need to be with you, Dr. Nelson, because you are so intelligent, and you are, you know what I'm saying, and you are so strong in your stance, and where we don't have to hold any punches with each other, because we know that each punch is a love tap, So that's one thing that I think is very important that we take from this conversation, is that the most important solution is strategic and principled dialogue and struggle with each other.
Yep.
With that being said, we're gonna wrap it up. Not gonna hold everybody too far behind schedule. It's only 7 minutes past 9, so. But we don't want to hold anyone too far past schedule. And Duke, if you can grace us with the love Black people. Oh wait, you know what? We don't even have to do that. I'm gonna just say, peace, Black family. We appreciate each and every one of you. We certainly appreciate all of you who tuned in and commented in the chat box. And keep in mind that you too can join us and have discussions with us, just like Dr. Nelson. And we want to ask that everyone is be careful and be Black.
Ashe. Thank you all.
Ashe.
Good night. We'll be getting to your comments later, we promise. Good night.